Welcome back to McKinley. I am sorry it's taken so long to get another video out, but we've been spending an age doing all kinds of underground and repairing work in this old room, but finally we've got something to share with you, and so we're going to have two updates on what we've been doing in this old room. The first is the cosmetic level, and then the second video is going to be all the underground, the pipe work, the sewers, the water pipes and things which no one will ever see, but were essential to make sure that this railway is fit for purpose for the next 20 years. So with not much further ado, let's take you through London. And I'm going to start at the far end here. You can see that we've managed to put in a small control panel here into a building. But first, we rebuilt the goods area here. It used to just be 3 tracks, and the really key thing was we wanted to be able to add some freight management, high value stuff like bonded warehouses, tobacco, frozen produce, bullion. So we've added additional siding spots in London where those 3 tracks used to exist. And we've added all these kind of buildings. People might think that they take away from being able to see the station, but from my perspective, stations in central cities were always very compressed. There was no space to do things, and so it is a compressed environment, but there are lots of assistive tools that allow our operators to see, what is the number of that engine hidden away on platform 4. So the goods area is all complete now. It's got all the kind of detail. Alan and Pete have been making all kinds of additional lamps that fit in with the old lamps we had here. We've managed to source all kind of components. We've lit all the buildings up, and I think it looks quite spectacular. We've even made our own handrails along here so that they're made of wire, so that they are Hoover proof is my mantra on all this. You've got to be able to run the Hoover over this railway to get the dust off it, and nothing will break off. It looks spectacular. I'm really pleased with it. The last time you saw this, we were ripping it all out. We put the back scene on and we were dismantling this railway. We've added all the uncouplers in along this fascia here, which looks fantastic. It fits in beautifully, and they're at the right height in terms of if you press here, you've got the right leverage. Going on through the station a second, you've still got the main station canopy that existed when David Marshall built that for me in 2003, 2004, but we never managed to take it any further. So I'm sure if David's watching this from Australia, he's going to love seeing the fact that we've got it all complete with my really favourite eagle cutaway components to allow the operators to see into the building if they need to. We made one mistake there, which is it's a bit high, so only tall operators can see in, but hey, you just have to wear a pair of heels. Going along, the back scene hides the tracks that we lifted up because they used to go around and underneath and turn round. Now they go straight through to the extension. And at the back there, all the lighting has been repaired. We've added things such as water filling points at the ends of the platforms. Up here, we've done a second version of this. We put in the cosmetic stuff like the nice posters, and this is identical to every station. Every station is different, but the structure of them is the same. Yard manager screens, these here, they're touch screens, together with a central control panel for London, assisted by the local control panel for the freight operator that's controlling just these points down here. It saves him having to get in the way or in the middle of the yard to be able to change points here. This panel here, I don't need to talk about it tonight, but it's identical in its architecture with the green buttons, the red buttons, the way that routes work between points. If you were going to set one and then t'other, it will set them all. It won't right now because it's all locked out, but it functions in a similar way. The 2 yard screens for London are slightly different to what we've got in Wakefield and Sheffield, in that this one here is predominantly focused around the freight facilities here and gives the operator his instructions as to what to do. It also carries the carriage sidings around the exit of London, and it also controls the 2 tracks in the station, which is the goods reception and platform 6, which is often used as a goods runaround. The central panel I've talked about, And the other screen over here, that's to control the platforms, the passenger platforms 1 to 6 and the engine shed. Because the key thing about McKinley is that every movement, be it with a carriage, a set of carriages, a freight set like a triplet of wagons, every movement is predetermined, not in some structured, formal, repetitive way, but if a train comes in and a new engine has to be brought out, that engine has got to be taken off, it's got to be watered, it's got to be cold, it's got to be turned if it's a steam engine, and then shedded. And so those actions are there for the operators to take. So they run their station here, and there's typically 3 operators. Moving forward through the station, we've got the sort of mild level of detritus in the station. The one thing that I found when looking through all the pictures of railway yards in the 50s and 60s was that on the whole they were relatively clean. Our perceptions in hindsight were that they were very mucky and full of stuff, but I couldn't find any pictures to justify having lots and lots of muck, and certainly not too much greenery or shrubs or weeds and those things. I think most of the stuff had been killed off by all the toxins in the coal and the ash that was burnt. We put people on the platforms. Charlie was emphatic about that. We've added stuff, everything's been working. None of the throat was changed. It stood the test of time, it still works. The engine shed we modified. We changed 6 points that were in the entry point, the way through to the ladder that goes into the shed. They used to be medium points, and locomotives don't work well on medium points. So we compressed long points by cutting the tops and tails off them and putting them in and substituting them in, rearranging the track wiring slightly. That was quite hard work doing that, but other than that and the track work in this yard here and dressing London in its completeness with all the station roof and the back scenes, it really is the same station. The other 2 or 3 things in London that are of note are the engine shed. We put a new engine shed in. We added a fueling facility for diesel locomotives, and we also anglicised the turntable a bit from the Faller ones that we use as standard on this railway, which of course have those rather ugly green, almost like greenhouses on them. So this one here looks like a classic Great Western turntable. We nicked bits off a Dapol kit to make it look like that. And so that's London, and I think it looks quite magnificent. I'm really pleased with the hard work everyone's put in to make this look spectacular. However, there's more to see. Let me show you Manchester. So this is Manchester as it's now finished. It's been a bit of a traumatic journey, some real highlights, but some painful points as well. The most fundamental change for Manchester was that we used to have a rather rickety control panel mounted on 4 little wooden sticks that sat on this shelf in the roadway. And if we wanted to adopt what we have in other stations, I needed to find an awful lot more of operator management real estate. So I took the bold decision to put effectively a large valance above Manchester. We were worried that it would make Manchester feel crowded, but actually it doesn't do anything of the sort, and it looks quite spectacular. And you can see that it's in a very similar format to that of London. You've got 2 yard manager screens, you've got the station manager panel here. The station manager panel is the timetable. I'm not going to go into that today, but each station is running to a timetable, a network-wide timetable, delivering trains from one station to another. The yard manager screen here focuses on the platforms and the engine shed for the station manager and the number 1 operator. In Manchester we had no place to put the uncoupler buttons, and so we decided to mount them interspaced between the individual panels along here, and the operators can press those here and control their trains with another hand. So that appears to work quite well. Our trusty control panel built in the same way. You'll see a lot of similarities. The fonts we've used, the colours, the red buttons, the green buttons. Once our operators know how to use them, they're away. Then there's the other yard panel down there, and that controls the freight operations in the yard of Manchester, as well as the brewery at the back. So in one sense, Putting this canopy in with all those control panels was the easy part. There was some heavy foot clumping on the layout to get it in, but it wasn't dramatic. The problem we have, or had, with Manchester was that it was the most scenic part of the layout already. David and Marshall and I had completed this in the early 2000s and it was beautiful. So of course when you come in and you add in something in the region of about 15 to 20 uncouplers, when you start to add in somewhere in excess of 40 RFID readers, you start to hack the track around, and no matter how careful you are, you start to create damage. And there was an awful lot of destruction of the scenic components in Manchester. The big buildings, we could say, but all the nuanced stuff, the fine railings, everything got damaged and broken. The lamps got broken. It was just a frustrating process, but we had to get on with it. So that was the challenge of upgrading an existing layout, I suppose. And I'll cover the issues of going underneath, because all the additional wiring, blimey, that was something else. At this end of it, nothing particularly changed. It was simply about adding the uncouplers and the RFID and then restoring it back to its former glory. And it does look magnificent. Andy's done a stellar job with that. The one thing we never had was lighting in the engine shed and the signal box. Pete and Andy have added those things in there, which gives a lovely hue to those two areas. Going on further now, if we start to walk down a bit, then the next thing that we had was the goods yard. And the original looking of this is, again, we had the similar problems of London, which were there were 2 or 3 very long sidings just going into a relatively nondescript cardboard miniature goods shed that you'd find in a small station. So everything was slightly out of keeping when you consider this is supposed to be in the centre of Manchester. And Gordon Edgar suggested we needed something far more imposing. We considered the track diagrams, and what we ended up doing was putting 4 points in over here to allow us to be able to get in the different roads into the goods loading and unloading area, and also to get out onto the departure tracks where you can see those long wheelbase wagons are parked now. So in terms of track changes, it was relatively small. There were just 4 points to be inserted and cutting out existing straight track. And then we also started looking around for what would be the right style of goods shed. And I came across the derelict building in Derby Friargate, which just had that sort of Victorian gravitas. And Andy got to work and he kit bashed, or he basically built that building down there, and it looks amazing. It fits the part, it fits the station, it looks spectacular. The station canopy itself we restored. We repaired all the lighting. Pete actually built all of these yard lamps from scratch using bits of brass. We used the original ones as templates and we rebuilt new ones because the old ones have got, to some extent, they've been damaged already by our operating over the previous 20 years. But also, as I said, the upgrade created untold damage. We put wire fencing in along here so it's hoover proof and hand proof. In fact, if you catch your hand on it, it's quite sharp, which I imagine is a good thing. You'll only make that mistake once on this railway. And the weathering of the station and the buildings, Ivana did a great job there. And so Manchester is beautiful because it's restored back to its glory and it's got all the additional functionality we need to run McKinley Railway as we want it to be. Let me show you what we're going to be doing with Birmingham. This is Birmingham Broadway station. And to some extent it was always the poor cousin on the operations on McKinley. It was complicated to use, but we never really have figured out how to maximise the use of it. We put some changes in place on Birmingham. It again has suffered some of the cosmetic damage we had in Manchester, but it's a much smaller and narrower station. So the principal injuries were the lighting. And that was about it. We managed to salvage most of the station. The platforms have remained intact. There were 3 sets of track changes we've made here at Birmingham. The first is right at the northern end and is in relation to the 2 points, the 2 double crossovers. The next is we've added an end loading bay here. And oddly enough, Andy has put in that facility, that structure, today. It looks fantastic. I didn't even know it would come. It looks fantastic, but we haven't finished up the track. That's a single additional good facility. And then the major works, which I'll cover in a minute, are down at the northern end of the yard where we remodeled it. And in essence, what we did is we used to have two long sidings here that served no real purpose. What do you do with them? And so we chopped them down so that they could store two halves of an operational train, a goods train, a full-length coal train coming in. And we've added an industry down there, and we've also improved the track geometry so that we can get locomotives from the stabling point into platforms 1 without blocking the main line. We did some very clever things also with getting access to the track underneath. I'll cover that in a minute, except that from an operational perspective, the operators, if you take these two little huts off from these hidden hinges, you can lift sections up to get access to the underground sections of layout when things go wrong. But more about that a bit later. So operationally, Birmingham has changed a little bit. We're going to add one industry in the south. The same things, the granary is staying in the north, the end loading is added. What we've got to do yet is we're going to be putting a beam in across the two supports here, because this is way too close from an operator perspective. As you go in, you tend to bash your head. So it's going to be set back at that kind of position where operators can operate screens. There'll be two panels and one screen. The two control panels will be for the south and north end, and the central screen will tell both operators what they're doing with the yard. The station manager is going to be sitting in a different location. He's going to be sitting at the end of the McKinley Island here, where I used to sit when I was running trains in the early 2000s. And his job's going to be really different to any other station manager, because he will have to control the access of his operators with their green and red buttons to cross the main line, because you've got two main lines that are in constant use coming through here. And it's very easy when you're operating to forget that you're doing stuff and it's blocking the world up. And so he is there almost as a signalman come station manager, allowing his operators to get access to the main lines and then cutting their time off so that they can pull into a siding, they can let trains go by, and then they come back out again, and so on and so on. We haven't finished this yet. This is a project for summer 2025. But I'm excited about this one because suddenly Birmingham will become quite the most challenging station to operate, and different again from everything else we've got on McKinley. The challenge for Birmingham is, where do you put the uncoupling panels? They have to be pertinent to where the operator's working. So we devised some relatively robust, they're not particularly sexy, they're not sloping because it's quite a low level area and you can't stand back far enough. So it seemed appropriate to have them vertical so you can press on them vertically like this. In addition, we've also put some of this perspex to safeguard the tracks in Birmingham and also the McKinley Road run-round lines from bums and tums. It was a frequent problem that operators would lean back here and then derail a train as it went past their derriere on this side, or if they leant in too far, they would knock the cardboard roof canopies off, which they can be put back again, but they often didn't know they did it. So there'll be a roof canopy waiting to derail an arriving express train. So this safeguards the railway from the operators to some extent, where the tracks are a bit too close. Andy has been busy with some just delightful little touches, little cameos. Look at that scene there, with them unloading the planks. So the industry at the southern end is going to be a tin shop or tin works, and it's basically going to be serviced by these two tracks here. And I'm envisaging that Andy will construct me something which sits proud of the viaduct on either side here, so that it obscures the view a little bit of this area. Here we've got a brake van track, which we never had before, and at the front we've got the loco stabling point, and you can see the remnants of the old track line where it used to go and how much more compact it is now. This double slip here allows them to get up into the run round tracks, and it also allows them to get into platform 1 without having to foul the main line. So let me tell you about some of the other bits we're going to do. If I go round to the other side of the aisle now, we'll talk about Portarlington. So finally we're on to Portarlington. Portarlington definitely was the poor cousin on McKinley. We could never really operate it particularly well because of this narrow aisle and the operators being busy with Manchester. And so it didn't really have a purpose. Secondly, unbeknown to me, there was a kind of Pico track work called Pico Universal, and the two leading right curve points that go into the yard here were universal points. They were electrofrog, but everything used to fall off into them, and we could never figure out what was going wrong. Well, James Norris quickly identified that if we bought some modern ones, things would stay on. And so James has replaced those 2 points. We're not changing any more point work here. Portarlington is going to get a new lease of life in a different way. We're going to install a carriage sidings in the middle section of these 3 tracks. We're going to put a carriage siding shed in here, just a big shed, say 5 foot long, with 2 sections of lift-off roof, so if we've lost a DMU or something in the middle, we can nudge it if necessary. There won't be an awful lot of changes. It hasn't been damaged in any great way because not an awful lot's been done to it. That's an irony, isn't it? We've added all the RFID. The existing uncouplers were already there. We're going to have a control panel. We've moved it from, it used to be mounted on the wall here. It had no purpose. We're now going to have a drawer here, which will have this control panel mounted in here together with the uncouplers. And its new purpose is going to be to hold the carriage stock that's not in use, depending on the time of day. So in the daytime, Manchester and London, being the principal passenger stations on McKinley, have got all kinds of trains running to and from. But at the end of the day, new stock has to come from somewhere. The night mail train, the night sleeper train, the overnight newspaper trains. They will all be stored in Portarlington in the daytime, and they will all come out as we go into nighttime operations, and all the daytime stock, all the DMUs, all the 4-car coaching stocks will all be taken from the local stations and the carriage sidings for Manchester and for London and be brought round and put into Portarlington in preparation for the nightly sleep. So this will be full at night time of daytime stock and in the daytime full of nighttime stock. So it's our coaching sidings for the railway because they take up an immense amount of space, carriage stock, doesn't it? You know, it's 8 foot for an 8-car train with an engine on the front. And so this is going to get a new lease of life. And the operators in Manchester will turn round, will flip these screens from one roll to another, and they will just do the transition stuff. And we'll have to program that into the timetable so that they don't get overloaded. So it's not like they've got to do 15 jobs at once. There's going to be half an hour transition time for this team as all the stock is coming in and out. And so that's the last of the projects in this room. And so that really completes the journey of all the changes we've made or are about to make in this room. And I think it looks quite spectacular. So now let me tell you about what we intend to do for the next 6 to 9 months. The key objective for 2025, from my perspective, is to start to get our operators fluent with both these 2 new stations and, again, comfortable with operating a 5-station layout. That's going to take some time. We've got to get everybody up to the right level of skills. We haven't been having operating sessions for nearly 4 or 5 months now because we've been so consumed with trying to do the repairs to the structure on the underground section in this room, as well as doing the cosmetic layer. So the goal, I suppose, is twofold. The first is to improve the operations to the point where it's all smooth, it's running, the stock is working reliably. The second thing I want to try and achieve is to get the scenic trains running again, and we're going to be doing a specific video shortly about them because they're great fun. If you think about in the real world, most of the trains and the freight trains you see, especially now, but certainly in the 1960s, I had no idea where they're coming from or going to. coal trains, we don't have a colliery here, we don't have a power station, we don't have a port, we don't have a car ferry, we don't have any of these things, but trains were going around the country. And I've got a whole ton of stock in Hades waiting to start to come back up again and enjoy the freedom of the railway. And so that's what we're going to also be working on, to getting that working well as the operators are busy with their station duties. Fantastic trains are coming by at the same time. We're going to be launching a website in March 2025 in time for, there's a model railway show in Abingdon called AbRail, which is being run by Abingdon and District Model Railway Club. So we're going up to that show. We're going to be showing how you can use RFID with JMRI, how you do train tracking with iTrain and Train Controller, and basically just sharing knowledge. But one of the things we're interested in doing is starting to reopen again in the summer of 25 for visiting clubs. And the website will be the framework for people to register and connect with us if they're members of clubs, or if they're not, how they can get in touch. So that's going to be an interesting time, because we enjoyed having visitors here and having operating days with people who know how to operate trains but haven't had the chance to play on something like this before. So that's going to be a really exciting thing for us in 2025, to get back to where we were 10 years ago. 10 years, can you believe it? Never mind. So what else is there to tell you? That really concludes, I think, the above rail stuff, the sort of the summary of where we got to. The next video is going to be about all the stuff we had to deal with underneath, which is a bit techie, but that's me. Thanks for watching.